All right. Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Colonial Outcasts. My name is Greg Stoker and I'm joined by co-host Mark Wayne. And we are joined today also by guest Sabika, Muslim poet, organizer, and activist. We did a live on Instagram yesterday and we really wanted to expand on this subject. So thanks for joining us today. Is there anything else you'd like to add about yourself before we dive straight in? No?
No, nothing at all.
Okay.
I mean, that's it. Yeah.
So today we're going to be discussing anti-Muslim sentiment and a long-standing history of violence in India, which we imagine has been inflamed significantly by the outbreak of hostilities in Gaza. The active genocide being effectuated in Gaza. So for a lot of people in the American continent, Europe, the Middle East, India is on the periphery of their geopolitical radar, despite its global significance and massive potential. I think over the past couple months, people have heard the term Hindutva, essentially Hindu national supremacists. Can we say that reductively?
Yeah, it's a political ideology, basically wanting an establishment of a Hindutva Rashtra instead of the idea of a Republic India. Yeah.
Right, and they've heard that term for the first time recently. They've heard about things like Kashmir for the first time. Also, they see vague connections between the inflamed tensions connected to the Palestinian people. To Palestine, sorry. And people are mystified why so many people from a country that languished under the British Raj for like 200 odd years would support a colonial project like India. So you're from India. I lived in India for a time, so I understand these things somewhat. But today, Mark over here is going to interject with clarifying questions as we proceed in order to try and make this more intelligible for people who have never been exposed to the history, culture, and politics of India, before now. Um, so, just as a question,
Yeah.
Mark, how long have you been delving into Indian history and politics?
I mean, as far as actually going through the whole history, the past 2 hours, past 24 hours, my knowledge of India has been primarily focused on the Sikh. I have a close relationship with Sikhs. I've always been fascinated by them.
Okay, nice.
So yeah, very little.
Okay,
But see, yeah.
okay. Yeah, I'd say like most Americans, right? Yeah. So,
Well, most Americans
all
don't
right.
know anything about India.
Yeah, probably not even where it's located on a map, and that's just being generous.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking, we're going to kick this off with a video from Uttar Pradesh, and you can tell us how widespread this Hindutva ideology is. So the speaker is Swami Giri, who is the president of the Hindu Raksha Sena, which is a Hindu supremacist organization based out of Uttarakhand. And Giri is known for delivering anti-Muslim hate speeches where he exhorts Hindus to take up arms and commit genocide against Muslims. So in 2017, for instance, he calls on Hindus to bear 8 children for the purposes of contributing towards conserving, preserving, and protecting Hindutva and the society. So that's just some context on the bullet points of this guy. You might even be familiar with him. So this is actually going to be in Hindi. So I'm going to overdub it in English because some people only listen to the audio. So we will stand up against every jihadi in India and clean the country of their presence. Whoever has understood the Quran is a jihadi. This is not hate speech. This is freedom of speech. Every Hindu should keep weapons at home. When you do that, you will be blessed by Ram and Krishna. So now we're seeing some images of the protests or the gatherings. So on January 2nd of last year, he had a crucial role in inflaming a lot of these speeches. So he talks about Myanmar and going to do some more direct quotes from him from the speech. There is not much difference between this country and Myanmar. Just a little difference is left. What happened in Myanmar? The ones who are practicing jihad in Islam, they would beat up the Hindus on the streets. Don't be mistaken. Buddhists and Jains are Hindus too. The jihadis would beat up Buddhists, Hindus, and leave them on the streets. Will you be waiting for this? There has been an announcement from the Dharam Sansad. We will not wait for this. We will stand up against each jihadi in India and will work towards cleaning their country of their presence. Modi has introduced the slogan Swachh Bharat. We will also work towards making a holy India. So, over the past few years, Myanmar has witnessed the genocide or ethnic cleansing of Rohingya Muslims. And this guy who was just speaking, this Prabodhanad, is alleging violence by Muslims in Myanmar and then calling for a safai, which is a cleansing of jihadis here. And when he's asked to specify or define what he considers a jihadi, he's asked, is there any difference between the criminals and all Muslims?
सारे मुस्लिम्स में
Or when you say jihadis, are you referring to all Muslims? He says, whoever has understood the Quran is a jihadi.
जिन्होंने कुरान समझा हुआ है
It is one thing to read the Quran and not understand it.
लेकिन वो आदमी समझता नहीं
But whoever understands
जो
it
समझ लेता है
becomes a
तो वो
jihadi.
जिहादी बन जाता है
So basically, it seems like he's just establishing a general framework to label anybody who is a Muslim or he doesn't like a jihadi. And so I guess we'd ask you, like, how widespread is this? How often do you hear this incitement speech? Well, what people now know is straight up genocide incitement speech from public figures and from the average day person.
Actually, the chief minister of Uttar Pradesh is a guy who is very famous for delivering these hate speeches, not just in before he was elected, but even after becoming the chief minister. So when we were growing up, these hate speeches or people giving these hate speeches or even the current chief minister or the current prime minister was taken to be rabid hate mongering people because it was under the current prime minister who was the then chief minister of Gujarat in 2002 when massive pogrom against Muslims happened in Godhra, and the court went on to give him a clean chit and basically say that he was not at fault, etc. But that's a different story. So the hate speeches were very less in number. They were in the newspapers would publish them in like probably the last page or some hidden pages where people are not going to read about it. But what has changed in the past 13, 14 years is the fact that people giving these hate speeches have become so common. Like earlier, for us, it was like, oh, really? When we were in college and undergrad, and in 2012, when I finished school and I entered university, for me, hearing these hate speeches was like, oh my God, how could someone say that? And now in 2024, I don't think a single day goes by when a hate speech like this is not our reality. This is just one guy who is part of some random organization, and also there
Yeah.
are multiple organizations. When the RSS got banned in India after killing Mahatma Gandhi, they decided to have multiple organizations doing what the whole aim of RSS is. Like, one should realize that this is not just a momentary political Hindutva fascist agenda. This is something that the RSS has been the Rashtriya
Yeah.
Swayam Sevak Sangh, which basically talks about, which is the one propagating, which is the ideological parent of the BJP, the current ruling party in India, and all of these little termites of hate across the country. So it has become super common, super common. And he's not the only guy. There are far more people like Yati Narsinghanand who have beaten up people, called for killing of Muslims. There have been multiple, multiple parties and rallies organized called Dharm Sansads. Basically, the coming together of these religious, spiritual, so-called religious spiritual leaders, all wearing this saffron clothing and being so rabid, feeding into this conspiracy that Muslims are taking over the country by increasing their population. Some conspiracy theories like love jihad. I mean, forget about these leaders. My own former classmate calls us terrorists all the time. Like, there is, like, our neighbors call us terrorists all the time. So the moment you're a Muslim, people would say things like, go to Pakistan, or you are a terrorist. And these hate speeches are not just common. They could be common and looked down upon, no, but they are common and actually celebrated. So people who give these speeches are celebrated, garlanded, and these hate speeches become reasons for them getting tickets and candidatures to stand for elections at both the state as well as the national level. So folks who have formerly lynched Muslims, killed Muslims, threatened Muslims, harassed Muslims, organized such meetings, actually hold high merit in the eyes of the current ruling party, and they are continuously awarded for the favors that they are doing, the favors that they are doing to this ideological agenda of declaring India a Hindutva Rashtra. And so these hate speeches increase rapidly during the election time, and they are covered a lot by the media. And actually, the thing is, a lot of it is covered by the media, but a lot of it is not. And these hate speeches are not just in the form of these lectures of a man standing on a podium with a mic and blurting this hatred out. These hate speeches are super common otherwise in the form of music. So a lot of these pop shows happen. There's a great book that Kunal Purohit, a journalist, has just written called Hindutva Pop, which is a study of music singers, pop icons spread across the country, not just performing online, not just becoming online personas and influencers with great followings, which, by the way, is another aspect that I would like to touch upon. Like, social media is a hub.
Mhm.
Is a hub of this hate, and you would find these people calling for killing Muslims, and actually beating up Muslims, making videos of it and putting online as a celebratory thing. Like, it's so common, and ultimately, who gets arrested? The person who was beaten up, the family of the people, Muslims who were beaten up, and it is super common. But not just online, but and they have millions of followers, like 8 million, 9 million, 10 million followers online, and people love them, and they openly comment that mullahs should be killed or Muslims should be killed. Oh, we will rape these Muslim women, and the children that will come out of the this rape would be Hindu children, the followers of Hindutva and all of those, and this is how we'll eradicate Muslims. But these Hindutva pop stars across the country are doing big music shows and singing
Yeah.
hateful songs, calling for the killing of Muslims and glorifying those who are killing Muslims, and basically just labeling all of us terrorists. And we hear that on a regular basis. Like, the moment you say anything against the government, you are either committing sedition, you are either anti-national, and if you're a Muslim, then you are a jihadi, you're a terrorist, you're a Pakistani, you're a desh drohi, or someone who has like betrayed the nation and all of that. So it's very, very common. I think during this podcast I will read a few messages that I get, so that you have an idea. This is one of my classmates who did masters with me in modern Indian history, who was with me in a paper that we took on gender history, who sat with me in multiple protests, and now texts me and says that, with the choicest of abuses, and says that, you're a terrorist, your
So,
family is a
so she
terrorist,
definitely
all
didn't have this ideology when you were working on your like masters together. But it's a recent development. I mean, it's been building over years, and now it's manifesting as radical fascism now. Um, so
yeah. Yeah, totally. And these hubs, I mean, the way it is fed, I am not generalizing it, but if you go to any of the
mhm,
engineering institutes, India engineering is super
yeah.
popular, as you all know. Every person has done a BTech, which is a bachelor's in technology, is an engineer. And you go to these engineering colleges, you interact with these students, and all of them, like a majority of them, I don't know what is this relationship between engineers and them being very, very Hindutva and fascist. These tech bros who are also fascist bros, and really believe in this, and say that, oh, let us talk about history, and they have some understanding of history from some WhatsApp forward or some
Mhm.
YouTube video that they have watched, and like, and they also have channels to talk about it, etc. So in fact, some of the IITs in India, engineering colleges in India, have a shakha, which is a branch, or like an outlet, that the RSS runs to get people on the ground to support them, and have been doing it for the past 100 years. And the people, I must say, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh and its people and its followers are so deeply dedicated to the cause that they work very, very hard. They sleep on the floors, they sleep on the courts, just trying to and they've survived in very difficult conditions, despite being a ban, just to propagate this hatred. So the hatred that is there is not just 10 years old, it's so old, and so they have established systems by going into villages and ensuring that they are the ones solving interpersonal disputes or family disputes, by opening an outlet in a university or a college, talking about or taking forward their agenda. So they've done so many tiny things, giving scholarships through their people so that they go and study in fancy universities. Like I know that the like really hateful right wing Hindutva folks who've gotten scholarships and admissions in
Right.
MIT and Harvard, and they've come back from there, and the representations of people that you see in Davos, etc., or all of these fancy big places, COP, and all of these international gatherings, which anyway are of ours, you would see these corporates, startup founders, made in India, entrepreneurs, all bootlicking the Hindutva
Right.
fascist government and enjoying
Yeah,
it
and
to the
so now
fullest.
you bring up the Hindu fascist government and the connection between the RSS and the BJP. I think people do need a little context on the RSS. Its genesis in the 1920s. Its celebration of figures like Hitler, for instance. How it developed and
Hitler,
how it embedded
absolutely
itself and connected
love for
itself with
Hitler.
the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP, which is the ruling party in India,
Yeah,
and the party which Narendra Modi, the
yes.
PM of India, is championing.
Yes. So basically, there was this guy called Savarkar who decided to write this book in 1923 called Hindutva. And I'm actually writing a response to that book. It's one of the most hateful books I've ever read in my life. He, in 1923, wrote this ridiculous text called Hindutva. And in 1925, another guy called Hedgevar started the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. This idea that that there needs to be a Hindutva Rashtra, and that he creates this distinction between who is a Hindu and what is a Hindutva. And Hindutva is like this political ideology of establishing a nation whose others are the minorities. So it is pretty established. There have been a lot of ideologues that RSS has seen, and right now the RSS is India's largest NGO. It is considered to be India's biggest and largest NGO. And in fact, Savarkar was the guy who was thrown behind bars and by the British, and he kept writing apology letters. In fact, there are so many memes about the fact that Savarkar kept
Like,
writing
let me out of
these.
jail, please.
Yeah, let me out of jail. I'll say sorry, whatever. And so,
So this book is
yeah,
this
it's
book
a very short
is
book.
basically like the Mein Kampf of it's
Yeah,
it's it's
it
almost
is.
like the
Oh my
same
God.
parallel
Yeah, it
story.
is.
Writing from a prison, nationalist, fascist, racist
Yeah.
ideology.
Yeah, and it also is completely built on militia. So it has little military training, military kind of training camp, lot of focus on discipline, getting up in the morning, wearing certain kind of uniforms, knowing how to use a stick. They have a
Yeah,
stick,
the
and they have
lot
these shorts
or
that they wear,
yeah.
khaki shorts and white. Yeah, the lathis that they have, and the white shorts. And I think now they have pants, but anyway, and they have these very military like discipline trainings, and they've established it across the country, like everywhere. And a lot of the leaders that you see part of the BJP right now are actually originally were part of the RSS, including our current prime minister. So what actually happened was, they were very sure that in like Muslims should not be appeased, they should not get anything, and India should be a Hindutva Rashtra. After India gained independence, they thought that Gandhi was, some of them thought that Gandhi was really very soft on the Muslims, etc. And so one of these people, and multiple reasons, I mean, they're very elaborate reasons, why one of them, Nathuram Godse, decided to shoot Gandhi, saying that he is the reason why we are headed in the wrong direction. And so they basically did this. And before World War II, the RSS leaders really admired not just Hitler, but they also really admired Mussolini. And Govalkar, one of the ideologues, literally was supremely inspired by Hitler's ideology of racial purity. I mean, purity, you would see, will figure in a lot of places. It also deeply comes from casteism in India. And later on, because they wanted to be in the good books of the British, they decided to support the British against Hitler. But deep down, ideologically, Indians still admire Hitler. Like Hindutva fascists admire Hitler, admire Trump. You name a ridiculous leader who has been fascist, who's oppressed people, caused genocide, and you'll find fanboys and lovers in Indian Hindutva fascists. Like they love Bibi, they love Netanyahu to no end. They would pray and perform havans for the Israeli occupational forces safety, and would line up and queue up and really do a thread on Twitter saying that please give us, we will come and for free serve in your army. And so it's very weird that they love Hitler, not weird, but they love Hitler and they
BB.
love the Zionists, pretty same, both of them,
Right,
analogy to
and I
go
just
on.
wanted to
Yeah.
reiterate for the listeners that this ethno-fascist ideology did exist before World War II and before the India, Pakistan, and later Bangladesh partition.
Yeah.
So it's not from the trauma of that horrible like post colonial
Yeah.
debacle. It this has
Yes.
been building for longer than that.
Yeah, it has been 100 years. Like 1925, RSS was founded. So 2025, it will be 100 years of RSS. And they were actually against the constitution. They were also against the Indian flag. They were banned for a very long time, but they were against the Indian flag. In fact, for the longest time, RSS offices across the country had never hoisted the Indian flag. They believed the Indian flag should only be
Right.
saffron colored, which is the color they believe belongs to the Hindutva ideology. And so the BJP, which was earlier the Janta Dal, the BJP is actually the political wing of the RSS, because they decided we no longer want to serve in a non electoral position. We should go ahead, seize power, fight elections. And hence they decided to, become a part of to become part of mainstream politics. And they decided to, stand up for this. So, yeah, so it was their BJP that became, and they don't just have the BJP, the Bharatiya Janata Party, but it was earlier, it was the Bharatiya Jan Sangh. But for everything, they have a party. They have a labor front, they even have a Muslim front, they have a women's front, they have a youth front, so they have like a Kisan front, so they like the farmers front. So they have their roots everywhere. They want to be present everywhere. So you'll have the labor unions working against laborers that
Mhm.
represent the RSS. You have Muslims, they have these token 5 6 Muslims, part of them, who are, those were the
Yeah,
leaders you would
yeah.
see in
Well,
every
there
TV
will
debates,
always be
etc.
collaborators. So yeah.
Obviously, yeah.
So I mean, when we talk about the
Yes.
genesis of the RSS and stuff like that, like how much of this do you think was inflamed by the policies of the British Raj and their overriding principle of divide et impera, like divide and rule?
Yeah, divide and rule. um i feel uh I feel the British, of course, played a very important role in this whole divide and rule thing. But um, I think by continuously saying that it is just, generally what happens is whenever in India you talk about communalism, whenever you talk about casteism, um, people assume and say that it is only the British. And one cannot deny the role of imperialism and colonization in creating these rifts, in creating and sponsoring leadership and hateful leadership or communal leadership, etc. But at the same time, I would like to mention that things like casteism and this idea of purity existed
Right.
far before the British came into India. This idea of racial purity, this idea that we are superior, this idea of casteism, this idea of who a foreigner is and who is not, existed, undertones existed. British supported these people
Mhm.
in so many ways. They really gave them a lot of leeway. So I won't fully blame imperialism. I do blame them for communalism and for a lot of issues, for creating this kind of tension, for the ridiculous partition and all of those things, and what happened and the aftermath of it, and the process of it, all of that. But I do think that there are some roots in Indian subcontinent's obsession with purity, racial superiority, that extends, like, that is very, very that exists in these spaces for a very, very
What
long time.
what was the
So yeah.
origins of this ideology? Like, I know it probably goes way back, but if you had to pinpoint a certain time in which it really sprouted, what would you say that time period was?
Are you talking about the caste system?
Not the caste system,
Okay. Okay.
the racial purity thing.
The I mean, the racial purity thing is deeply rooted in
Right.
casteism. The idea that some people are superior, some people are less. You should marry within your own community, within your own caste, within your own varna, within your
Okay,
own
so
jati,
that's
etc. That is
clarifying for me
like
because you're saying that the racial
deeply
purity thing
old.
came from the caste system, or was it vice?
Yeah, I'm saying that it has roots in the
Got it.
caste system.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. It has roots in the caste system, which continues till today in big ways. In fact, victims of lynchings are not just Muslims in India, but also Dalits, and they've been victims of lynchings for a very, very long time.
The
Dalits are,
untouchables, what we commonly call them. Well,
untouchables was a word that was
during the
used.
Raj, yeah,
Yeah,
but that's essentially,
yeah. Dalits is a more
yeah.
political, basically people who are community of people who are the majority of the country, who are considered not belonging to a varnas. They do not belong into the caste order. They have suffered atrocities historically, systemic marginalization, discrimination, and continue to do it till now, like not allowed to drink water from the same well, not allowed to study in schools, not allowed to take up professions that they want. And so it continues till today, in a big, big way. Not allowed to marry outside, and until today not even allowed as a groom, as a Dalit groom, in a country like India, which calls itself, at least on paper and constitutionally, supporter and believer of equality, where casteism is completely where on paper rights are protected of people, where reservation and affirmative action is in place. Despite all of that, socially, we are one of the most, we are not one, we are the most casteist, racist, communal societies and misogynist societies of all times, is what I feel, and continue to be
Right.
in so many ways. So yeah, Dalits are for are one of the biggest victims, and very, very marginalized by the current Hindutva regime, because they want to bring back older orders. And
Right, and technically the
yeah,
caste system's supposed to be kind of not a thing anymore. It's supposed to be outlawed, right? Oh yeah,
only on paper. Yeah,
not in
only
practice.
on paper.
But do you think this
No.
pre-existing bent, socio-cultural bent towards ethnic and social prejudice kind of paves the way to make imagining a Muslim Hindu like apartheid more of a reality, more of just an everyday like, yeah, sure, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do it.
It sounds even more a great idea because for a nation to exist, for a Hindutva nation to exist, or any nation in the world to exist, there needs
Mhm.
to be an other. Without a villain, without an anti-national, a nation cannot exist. And so right now, for a Hindutva nation to exist, it is very important for it to have villains. And the minorities, the Muslims, automatically become villains because you could create a history of foreigners, foreign Muslim invasions, like making the whole Delhi Sultanate the Muslim leaders who came and destroyed India. Whereas without understanding the history, that India was not what the India is right now. It was basically princely states. It was, kingdoms which were always fighting with each other, destroying each other's temples, destroying each other's, cultures and languages, killing each other, plundering and looting each other. And they were all like kingdoms. In fact, against the British, we were not even united, and the idea of nationalism only came properly after
Yeah.
1857. The first war of independence was actually a war of different kingdoms for their own rights, from Jhansi to Delhi to Mughals to whatever. It was a fight for their own kingdoms of Peshwa, whether the Queen of Jhansi, or whether it was Peshwa Baji Rao, or whether it was the Peshwas, or it was the Mughals. They were all fighting for themselves. It wasn't the idea of an Indian nation that actually came later and was expanded in the early 20th century in a bigger way, and the formation of Congress and all of that. And so right now, the Hindutva nation that is being made needs a villain, and that villain are Muslims. And hence, to be able to create that, you need to show that they are villainous because they came, they invaded, they looted, they raped women. All of these things, tools of wars that were used, can never
Mhm.
be justified, but also are used by everyone across the world. And using that history to villainize Muslims now is what the norm is. Like, writing about it, basically saying that some ridiculous ideas that we used to take in our childhood, things like the Taj Mahal wasn't actually built by Shah Jahan. It's There was this guy called Professor
Mhm.
P.N. Oak.
Okay.
Okay, is not a professor. This guy, P.N. Oak, and his student, Dina Nath Sharma, they had these ridiculous ideas which we heard while growing up, and we used to make a lot of fun. And the idea was that Taj Mahal is actually a temple called Tejo Mahalaya, that the Vatican City is actually a temple called Krishna Vatika, that Kaaba in Mecca is actually a temple and it has like a Hindu deity inside, that Australia is Astrale, and all of those things, that basically everything belongs to the Hindus across the world. And these ideologues kept talking about these things and propagating these things. And then multiple conspiracy theories like love jihad, that things like, oh, Muslims basically spread a net, try to slyly get men and women of Hindus to fall in love with them and then convert them to Islam. And this idea was
Mhm.
called love jihad. And we used to consider all of this really ridiculous and hilarious, crack jokes about it until they became laws in
Wow.
India. So
Right.
most of the states now have love jihad laws. And so it's just mind blowing that a Hindu and a Muslim cannot actually, especially if it's a Muslim man and a Hindu woman, cannot actually go and marry without proving to the magistrate that they are not being converted out of force. And especially in my state, and multiple states across the country have this law. And so it's become all of these things which we took as a joke, these conspiracy theories, they are contributing to create an image of the Muslim villain. They produce a lot of kids. They will, whichever position that they are in, they are going to, destroy the nation. You could never trust Muslims. You should not do business with Muslims, and all of those things. A lot of these
Yeah,
conspiracies, and create this villain for a
right.
nation,
So
And
basically.
I
And
think
there's
it's
multiple.
sorry, Mark, 1 second.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I know that yeah, the creating the villain thing. I mean, that's existed for a long time in India, but I don't think the post 9/11 actions of the United States in the Middle East and in Central Asia helped anything because I moved to India after a while, and when people learned I was in the U.S. Army, I heard a bunch of wild stuff like congratulations, and I'm like, what? No, I got out because I do not agree with our policies and stuff. And so they were just
Yeah.
like, so how do you think these Hindutvas were like? How do you think we should deal with the Middle East? I was like, I don't know. I think we should get out. And they're like, okay, well, I think America should nuke the entirety of the Middle East, and that's how you solve that problem. I was like, that's not how you solve that
Yeah.
problem. But that was
Yeah.
just a thing I heard on the regular, and I was without moving there, I understood the history and the history of the partition and stuff, but I didn't expect that level of what I would call extremism or just straight up fascism, ethno fascism.
Yeah. Every person in India who is a believer in Hindutva fascism always wants to talk about how India is a nuclear power. We have so much of power. Everyone, America is doing the right thing. Israel is doing the right. Any entity across the world who commits crimes against Muslim bodies, Muslim people, nations that are countries and nations that represent Muslims in any ways are considered heroes by Indians. And they think the final solution is absolutely destroying Muslims, reducing them, maiming them, taking away all their rights. In fact, celebratory posts. Could you imagine? India had celebratory posts. Indians online were creating memes and celebrating the killing of children by the Israeli occupational forces,
That's insane.
celebrating the killing of Muslim kids, girls, celebrating and asking for like I remember, I didn't save this, but I saw a tweet under a Israeli soldier's post, basically requesting him to make a video of raping
Oh, so just
Palestinian woman, and that they will do the same. They will do
so
the
they
same
want
to
to
Indians in India.
they
Of
want to share
Indians,
snuff films.
yeah, yeah, they're like, oh, we all of us must. What Israel is doing to Gaza is what Muslims all over the world deserve. Even like during elections, they were passing around messages like, if you do not want to convert India to Palestine, then ensure that BJP comes into power, because it will there's a parallel universe that exists beyond the mainstream social media, which is the world of WhatsApp. In fact, data was made cheap in India to ensure that everyone
Mhm.
gets access to fake
Mhm.
news and fake information. And regularly, the current establishment uses this machinery to basically create new histories. And we call it the WhatsApp University, that is teaching everyone wrong history, making them more hateful, telling them some ridiculous understanding of development. Everything that is against, that criticizes the Indian government is a foreign conspiracy, is a jihadi conspiracy, is a terrorist conspiracy. Like right now, this conversation, the moment you put it online and right wing Hindutva folks, trolls,
Mhm.
find you, they're going to say that whatever this is a foreign conspiracy against the strong state of India, because the West cannot see us grow. And so
Okay.
So,
it's hilarious.
so
Yeah.
when did this shift happen against the Palestinians in India in the culture there? Because I know that historically India was pro-Palestinian, right? And there was that atmosphere of supporting the Palestinians. When did it take a U-turn on that?
When people see, India had a lot of love for Palestine and the people of India. Actually, what has changed is massively is the people of India, and we should, like, along with the government, the people of India themselves have become like our common old friends and colleagues. They have become deeply hateful. So that is what is gone wrong. Earlier, I remember the generation above us. We did, as I mentioned yesterday as well, we did a lot of blood signed campaigns to support Palestine, to talk about the genocide happening in Yemen, and all of these things. And India had felt, and the people in India felt a moral responsibility to stand for people across the world who have been marginalized. However, this absolute growth of capitalism in India, this looking up to Israel for its
Mm.
defense power, and having all of these big, um, uh, you know, contracts and treaties with Israel on agriculture and on and even police trainings and surveillance equipment, etc. But what also majorly played a role was Israel's
Yes,
outreach
that and that's what I
to
was gonna. That was kind of what
India.
I was getting at. Is that Israel is very good at going to the gatekeepers of a country and monopolizing it and infiltrating it. They're very good. They're very skilled at that, and they use all kinds of methods, whether it be bribes, sweet deals, even just emotional relationships. Even they're very good
Blackmail.
at that. Blackmail, all
Right.
kinds of methods. Whatever they do, they're very good at that. They've always been good at that. Um, now,
Yeah. So they did that in India a
yeah.
lot. We actually, in our Sino-Indian India war, like Indo-Chinese war, we used supplies from Israel. In Indo-Pak war, we used supplies from Israel. From 2006 onwards, we got deeply interested in agricultural
Mhm.
tech of Israel. Then later on, we also India decided to actually train their own police officers
Yeah.
in the Israel police headquarters, and decided that, you train our people, until I think Indians found out that Israel was also like keeping a tab on their
Well, that
police folks as well,
th
and so
they're so
they
they were basically
they used spyware, Israeli spyware called
yes,
Pegasus,
yes.
in the
That
phones of activists
can
and leaders and all of that, and then denied it by saying that we didn't, it's a foreign
can we
conspiracy.
hone in on that for a second, the big tech? Because I've, been interested in the big tech relationship that Israel has with India, in which they,
Oh,
have supplied India with technology to, to kind of uh, control the population and do invasive surveillance and then weaponize that against the Muslim population. So it's kind of been a relationship with India and Israel where it's like, hey, we're going to give you all this stuff. We're going to give you technology. We're going to work with you guys agriculturally, like you said, introduce, have this cross pollination. But
also
yeah,
culturally,
all
also
culturally too.
culturally.
But we need you to do me us a favor. Can you try to turn your population against the Palestinians and turn them against the Muslims? Can you do that for us? And then we'll do this thing. That's been my impression of the relationship. And I want to see if I want to ask you what the big tech relationship has done to the Muslim population, how it's been used against the Muslim population and been weaponized. Obviously, spying. So you mentioned spyware. The Pegasus is a topic I really want to go into, and what role that's played in that.
Um, I think you're giving a lot of credit to Israel to convince India, even if Israel wouldn't have convinced the Indian government to turn its population against Palestine, even before the government said anything. The Indian Hindutva supporting, fascist supporting population was
Mm.
already pro Israel, not just right now, but they have been pro Israel for like 2 decades now, like at least
So
at
they
least a decade.
capitalized
Like
on the fertile
our
territory
generation,
of fascism that was already there, and then
yeah, it was
exasperated it.
already a fertile territory, and they did a lot of things, like I will tell you things like, it was coming in this when we were, I think over the past 10 years, 10, 15 years, this idea that look up to
Mm.
Israel as a nation, because it was deeply colonial to think of the fact that look up to
Mhm.
Britain as a nation, or look up to the USA
Mm.
as a nation. But to see Israel in the Middle East becoming self-sufficient, becoming, having top military, having top intelligence, Indians were like, oh wow, like great opportunity over here, like wow, Israel is doing all of those things, they are our partners, Mossad is the best. And so these conversations became a big part of India's everydayness when they started, especially the younger generation, when they started seeing the future and imagining the future of India. And so, tech exchange, agricultural exchange, I will come to that. They are big in number, but also cultural exchange. When Netanyahu was in India around in 2018, he established a just a second, give me a second. So when he came to India, he did something called Shalom Bollywood event, where he invited all the Bollywood celebrities. Okay, and shortly after, Netflix also released a movie, Indian movie, shot in Israel. And so Israel, Tel Aviv as a destination, engineers and tech exchanges, but also cultural exchanges became like a big thing. And also after finishing their compulsory military services, younger Israelis would come to India, chill
Hmm.
in the mountains and
Hmm.
in Goa and all of these places, and like do things, and really like it became this kind of a relationship. In fact, right now, when the when after 7th October, one of India's very ridiculous hate mongering Bollywood actress called Kangna Ranaut actually went and met the ambassador of Israel to India and said that, like the Hindus deserve a nation of their own, I think Israel
Yeah, they
deserves a
try to
nation
equate it.
too.
They try to
A
make that
free-
emotional appeal and make that parallel.
Yeah.
When I was in Israel, I noticed.
And
Yeah.
the villain is, and the villain are the
Yeah. Yep.
Muslims. So the Palestinian Muslims, the Indian Muslims, whatever. And for them, Palestine is only like Palestine is just
Right.
Muslims for them. They do not see that there are other people, but there are Christians or Jews in Palestine itself who are also at the worst receiving ends of the genocide. But anyway, so this Islamophobia is so overwhelming and so has become a part of their narrative. And so even if we post stories in solidarity whenever, then there is this response that would come for someone saying things like, why do you care? Like, why? I want to know, why are Indian Muslims so invested in Palestine? And then they will bring everything down to your identity as a Muslim. Like, for them, you cannot see reason because you are a Muslim. You cannot see Israel's side because you're a
Yeah.
Muslim. So that becomes very important. Then coming to the
Yeah.
tech part of it. Now, Pegasus was a very, very big thing. The leaders, the politicians in the opposition actually blamed when they found out the prime minister for treason, because this was a spyware, as we all know, developed by NSO, which is the Israeli cyber arms company, and it was used as surveillance on activists, politicians, public officials, journalists in India. And it's actually it is a big, big, big treason, because it takes away people's right to, you know privacy, or their
Yeah.
freedom to exist in whatever, like their rights that have been promised by the constitution. And not just this, Adani manufactured drones recently. 3 days ago, it was in news how India is providing, after the attack on Rafah, how India is providing Israel with drones made by Adani. So I also must talk about the big
Mhm.
capitalists that have played a very
Yeah.
important role in bringing together Israel and India. Like, we cannot forget this whole drama of entrepreneurship that has come in the 21st century, which honestly, I want to throw flying chappals at all of these tech bros who just are like fanboys of Israel. But also this whole collaboration comes to benefit a lot of Indian
Yeah.
capitalists as well,
Well,
who support
yeah,
and fund,
like the Adonis, or the Metas. Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
Adanis. Yes, absolutely, like the Adanis. And so it's a normal thing. And then India, if you see, has always was the first Asian country, state, to have accepted, to have recognized the state of Palestine. And then a lot of prime ministers have actually hosted Palestinian leaders in India, and people really cared about Palestine, and were able to draw parallels between, and actually saw that as colonization, because they'd just come out of fighting colonization. They just fought a full freedom struggle, and they'd just become free. And so there was some sympathy towards Palestine, and India was taking all of these stands. But it has been walking for a very long time, a tight, like a very weird diplomatic position, where our prime minister keeps supporting Israel in through words. All the leaders keep supporting them in words. But our Ministry of External Affairs would say that we believe in the state of Palestine and we support the state of Palestine. So, but that is just
Right.
in writing. But the actual ground reality is that people actually, the leaders actually continue
Right,
to
and that's
support
one thing.
Israel.
That's one thing I did
And
want to talk about is that Modi, Narendra Modi, for those who don't know, Prime Minister of India, he's actually played a pretty even path when it comes to basically electing ministers and henchmen who are like chief ministers of provinces in India who are very Islamophobic. But when it comes to his own rhetoric and stuff, he plays a pretty even keel. Like, would you say?
I mean, well, he is historically, he's been the guy. Like, he's been the star of
Right.
Hindutva fascism. You know, right after Vajpayee, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and Advani, Lal Krishna Advani, LK Advani, he is the guy. And so only when he speaks internationally does
Yeah.
he do
Yeah.
all of these things. But he ends up using rhetoric. And earlier he has compared Muslims to dogs. He has said things like, when Muslim women across the country were sitting in protest, and Muslims across the country were sitting in protest against the Citizenship Amendment Act, he basically said that you will recognize them with their clothes,
Mm.
basically insinuating that you will recognize Muslim women by their clothes and Muslim men by their clothes. And so he was insinuating that these are the traitors, you recognize them by their clothes and all of those things. So he's it's just that we have even more rabid hate
Mhm.
mongerers now, that he seems like people have started to see him like a more balanced guy, when actually he has been responsible
Right. Well, it's
genocidally.
kind of like Netanyahu. Netanyahu, obviously, in his close circles, he'll obviously talk very genocidal, but when he's obviously presenting it to the world, he says, we're trying to minimize civilian casualties, but indoors he's saying like, yeah, let's kill them all. They're all animals. It's double speak. You have to put on a new face when you're going before the world to appear that you're moderate, you're balanced, and you're doing the compassionate, righteous
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
And so Modi, when he's
He's never had a press conference, by the way. Our prime minister has never had a press conference. He only does one-way talk, which is called Man Ki Baat, which is like, I'm talking from my heart. And he does this radio online show where he only does this one-way conversation. The sitting prime minister for the last 12 years for the last 10 years, has not had um, a single press conference where journalists could freely
Mm.
ask him questions. He only gets people who are already his stooges to come and talk to him
Softball
one way, like
questions.
one on.
yeah.
Yeah, not even softball questions. Only, Modi ji, why do you love mangoes?
That's
That's a
That kind of
softball question.
Yeah,
questions.
that is the quintessential low hanging fruit of softball questions. But he actually
Yeah,
does take
yeah.
questions occasionally from foreign journalists, and he
Oh.
tries to present himself like when he's representing India in a place like the Oval Office or alongside President Biden a couple years ago. In a clip that I'm about to show you, um, as being a champion of democracy. He says, quote, democracy is in India's DNA. We are a multi-ethnic, pluralistic society. And when this is his response, and I'm just going to play it real quick, when he's asked to speak to human rights abuses in India.
Democratic values, and there is that's the nature of our relationship. We're straightforward with each other, and we respect each other. One of the fundamental reasons that I believe the U.S.-China relationship is not in the space it is in the U.S.-Indian relationship is that there's an overwhelming respect for each other because we're both democracies.
What steps are you and your government willing to take to improve the rights of Muslims and other minorities in your country and to uphold free speech?
I'm actually really surprised to say, this is Modi speaking. So people don't say it. Indeed, India is a democracy. And as President Biden also mentioned, India and America, both countries Democracy is in our
दोनों के
DNA.
डीएनए में लोकतंत्र है। भारत के
Lol.
लोकतांत्रिक
In
मूल्यों
India's
में
democratic
कोई
values,
भेदभाव नहीं,
there is absolutely
धर्म
no
के आधार पर,
discrimination,
न जाति
neither
के
on
आधार
basis of
पर,
caste,
न
creed,
उम्र
or
के आधार
age,
पर,
or any
न
kind of
भूभाग के आधार
geographic
पर।
location.
Oh my lord. I mean, these are all lies, of course. I mean, on paper, yes, we're a democracy. There's no discrimination on paper. That's what our constitution promised. We are a secular, socialist, democratic republic. That's what India is, welfare republic. But actually, um, the BJP is the torch bearer of taking this all out. I mean, they have had thumping majorities in elections because they've been able to destabilize elected governments in multiple states. They continuously buy people and get them on their sides. So even if democratically, for example, in Maharashtra, a particular government is formed, they will enter, they will destabilize that government, and they form their own government. They did the same in Bihar, they did the same in Bangalore, in Karnataka, and they continue to do this, and they continue to raid. I mean, they were responsible for getting chief ministers of other states which are not ruled by them removed, sent behind bars. The deputy chief minister of Delhi is right now behind bars. Sitting cabinet ministers in of the Delhi Vidhan Sabha are behind bars and have multiple cases on them. In the same way, they made the sitting chief minister of Jharkhand resign, literally run on the street by putting random cases on him. They made the chief minister of Bihar resign and from his initial coalition, and then retake the oath as the chief minister representing the alliance with BJP. So what they do is they've hacked the democratic system. In India, the democratic system has been hacked in so many ways. So all these people are democratically elected. But really, how and what? Like, once, even if you don't vote for them, they will find ways to come back and make their government. And that's what their idea is. They want India to have government at the center, which is BJP led, and at all the states, which is BJP led. And they play with demographies, they play with narratives. Every time a state elections is approaching, they will have a new narrative which creates Muslims as villains, which is hate. And now they're not even ashamed or embarrassed of that. They know that this works, and
Yeah.
they continue to do that. And they call for destroying mosques, which are being destroyed. Like earlier in 1992, when the Babri Mosque was brought down in India, it became such a hue and cry internationally. Now, every week a mosque is demolished and killed and destroyed. Graveyards of Muslims are destroyed, and no one bats an eye. And so they use the democracy to continuously, how is it democratic when even foreign journalists living in India critique the Indian government are made to give up their OCI
Yeah.
cards? How is it democratic when journalists who are speaking up are either removed or made to apologize, or they are thrown behind bars? Activists are thrown behind bars. People who are organizing protests have been charged with brutal laws like UAPA and sedition. Some brilliant minds are behind bars right now. So there's a whole drama that India creates, that internationally we are a big democracy. Trust me, there's a high possibility that the elections that are going to happen this year are possibly the last elections that India will see, because the way these folks are headed, it is clear that they want a Hindutva Rashtra where elections are not a reality at all. And if there are elections, they only be like minorities, I don't think,
Yeah.
would be allowed to vote. It looks like that. It
Yeah,
looks we are headed in
and
that
one
direction.
one point I did want to make is that when it comes to like ethno religious supremacy, I was living in Goa for a while, which is predominant, which is very Catholic. Um, yeah, and
Catholic, yeah.
so it seemed like a lot of the Catholics that I was talking to there weren't too worried about this anti-Muslim rhetoric. In fact, they were like bandwagoning that super hard, and I was like, just dude, like once they're done with the Muslims, they're coming for y'all next. Like I don't know, it just seems kind of like delusional, or like maybe they'll keep the Catholics on board so they can pretend to have a veneer of like religious freedom or something like
Yeah,
that. But
yeah.
I'm just yeah, it's
Well, you'll be very, very, I mean, you won't be shocked to know that BJP has a huge presence and
mhm.
foothold in Goa right now. And a lot of this narrative of oh, Goa is a place of shamelessness and it's where parties happen, this happen, and we need to purify the culture. That thing happens a lot, and especially in northern Goa, BJP has a strong foothold, and with every election, BJP's vote share increases, and BJP is trying to attract votes in a big way. Like it in Goa, like when I was there for work, I realized that every little street has
Yeah.
BJP posters.
Yeah, and
And
honestly,
yeah,
they're not going to cure Goa of of its shamelessness. There's just too much money to be made in the north. So,
yeah, for sure, for sure. They themselves are shameless. They just use the narrative.
right.
I mean, come on. The most shameless folks, their leaders are continuously caught in rape cases. One of the BJP leaders recently, a few years back, was responsible for killing, raping a Dalit girl, and then overnight her dead body was burnt by the police without even handing it over to the family. And so they're all goons, hand in glove with the capitalists, and they just and that's how they're building a nation. And you actually see this world over. Democracy has been, as an institution, as a method, has been hacked at every place, like even in the USA. Like you see how democracy has been completely co-opted by a certain class that forwards certain narratives, etc. I mean, you look at Pakistan, you look at Sri Lanka, like elections seem to have increasingly becoming a farce. And so, it is what
Yeah,
it is, even in
even
India right now.
within our own country, we're supposed to have like Republicans and Democrats, but like when it comes to foreign policy, they vote the exact same way. So it's pretty much like what we've been saying. It's a uniparty system, and the ruling political elite class is hand in glove with the corporate sector and the industrial sector.
All
So
this, all this.
yeah, it seems where
Yeah.
it's going, and I did want to pivot towards like what you know about the Indian military and how they're perhaps looking towards what the IDF is doing in Gaza and West Bank, and perhaps like implementing that in Kashmir or in other parts of India, or if you think whether or not you think
So
that's actually
I
happening.
Mm, okay, I must say that India has had a relationship with Israel, like a defense relationship with Israel, apart from using and training in like together, and using like giving each other military support, military tech support, etc. And India has become one of the largest buyer of Israeli weapons, uh, and and Israel is India's second largest
Mhm.
weapon supplier, and so it's huge. Like India's defense research organization and Israel's aerospace industries, they are collaborating on developing surface to air missile systems for the Indian armed forces, and like even using surveillance system that can penetrate foliage, especially in Kashmir, and security forces in the Kashmir Valley. Actually, I am not an
Mhm.
expert on the matters of Kashmir, but Al Jazeera in their report had mentioned this thing, where they've mentioned that how Indian armed forces have inducted Israeli UAVs, radar systems, surveillance tech, as well as anti-aircraft missiles into their thing, and they have specifically trained Israel has specifically trained Indian administered Kashmir, like the Indian administrative officers in Kashmir have been trained by the Israel National Police Academy, or have had some kind of training over there. And so the security forces that are present in the Kashmir Valley,
For sure. I just want to say that
like I can say a lot of things
yeah.
off record on that, but I
No,
will
we'll move on. I'll just
not
say that
otherwise.
this freaking Israeli surveillance tech is so pervasive. Pervasive. I live in Texas, and our border security is completely facilitated by Elbit Systems surveillance equipment on the Texas-Mexico border wall. It's everywhere. It's insane.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Right now, the farmers in India are sitting in
Hmm.
protest, and they have been shot at by pellet guns, completely destroyed and attacked by like farmers of India. Like India is still, is dependent on its agricultural sector, and over the past few years has completely villainized
Hmm.
its farmers, and says that farmers are all Sikhs, and they try, they're all Khalistanis, etc., and basically calling them names, whereas these farmers are from all over. And to stop them at the borders, they're using barricades, but they're using drones for surveillance and attack on these farmers, the Indian government. And these are Israeli drones. So it's that deeply rooted in India, like the
Why would
kind
they
of
be so
military
self-destructive
exchange.
like that, as attacking the farmers that provide the food? What is there?
Well, the farmers have been.
You can't
Well,
speak
the
against the
farmers have been in
government.
protest even when I was living over there like 2 years
No,
ago. That was
no,
an
I know, but
ongoing thing. So, like,
yeah, yeah,
They're
I'm
not being
aware of that. But
self-destructive. They're not being
they're
what's that?
not.
self-destructive. They're not being self-destructive. They will be self-destructive if the Indian public thinks that supporting farmers is a good thing. They have created a narrative in the head
Huh?
of the Indian public that these farmers are part of a larger conspiracy. They are the ones who are destroying the fabric of India. These farmers have been made villains. And in fact, the common public is cheering and is happy that the farmers are
But
being treated like
what's
this.
the
Like
accusation leveled against the farmers? What are
they
they saying? Like, what specifically are they saying that the farmers are doing? What's the conspiracy? What is the lines of the conspiracy? What are the bullet points?
So basically, they are trying to say that all the farmers basically belong to the
Right.
Sikh
Yeah.
religion, and they are all, and they belong to, and they are doing all of these things because they believe in the Khalistani ideology. So one
Uh
is
huh.
that wing. The other is that they are protesting because it's a part of a larger conspiracy against the Indian government.
Yeah.
Yeah, and third is all farmers are
Yeah.
anti-national.
Yeah.
So it's just yeah, it's just foreign intervention. Like for example, Rihanna. I remember last time when the farmers were sitting in protest, Rihanna had posted in support of the Indian farmers, and people are like, oh, there's a toolkit. There's a toolkit being used, and people are being paid to internationally to support the
Right.
farmers in India. How are the farmers getting so much of money? And so the Indian public continuously starts seeing anyone protesting against the current government as
Hmm.
villains. That's the kind of digital and presence and brain, I won't say brainwashing because it takes away the agency of the people who themselves are very hateful. They are
Yeah, they're choosing.
quite
Yeah,
like
yeah, they're choosing this.
intelligent.
Yeah, yeah,
They're choosing
Yeah.
this hate. So whenever people say, oh my god, the public has been brainwashed, I'm
Yeah.
like, no,
It's
not at
willful.
all.
Willful.
They know exactly what kind of clothes to wear, or how to write LinkedIn posts, and how to, send their resumes to big companies, etc. No one is
If
brainwashed here. They genuinely believe
if
in
you
all
don't
of
mind,
this.
can
Yeah.
I ask you about if there is a movement of solidarity between the Sikhs and the Muslims because they're experiencing very similar oppression? Can you go
Yes.
into that? Because
Huge.
it's something that I've really been interested in. Is that that solidarity, the parallels between the two and what they're going through?
Yeah, I think the Sikh community in India is, I mean, across the world, are people with the
Yes.
largest of hearts and
Yes.
always there to, support and really, be present. In fact, when I remember actually, because I was at the receiving end of this personally, when Muslim women were all sitting in protest for long, cold nights against the Citizenship Amendment Act. Um, Farmers and Sikhs, groups of Sikhs, came down from Punjab to come
Hmm.
and sit with us, to
That's
cook
beautiful. I
food for
love that.
us. They came, they set a whole langar in place, and they
I love
cooked
this
food
thing.
for us and said that we will sit in
That's
solidarity with
beautiful. I love
you.
that.
And when the farmers' protests happened, and there were a lot of people from Punjab, and there are people from Bihar, there are people from Rajasthan, there are farmers from UP, all over. But the Muslims are in absolute solidarity with the farmers. And actually, that's a weird thing to say because Muslims are also farmers. So it's not like they
They're
are,
not
it's like
separate.
a
Yeah,
whole
they're
Venn
yeah.
diagram of intersection.
yeah. Hey, guys, we do have to back up 1 second. I'm not sure a lot of people are familiar with who Sikhs are, so we're gonna have to define our
Oh, that's
terms
Yeah.
real
right. We're in
quick.
America. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Oh, and we have a lot of listeners in Europe, so there's that too.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about that, Sabika?
Okay. Who the Sikhs are?
Okay,
Oh
okay,
my
okay.
God,
No, no,
that's
no.
such
Just the
a
most
that's
basic
a great story.
reductive thing, and about what Khalistan is.
Um, yeah, about Khalistan is, I mean, that's a
Yeah,
political movement, and that calls for a separate state of Khalistan. I think like it that's a different conversation altogether. Sikh which is what Sikhism is, and who are the Sikhs. Sikhism is is a religion that has roots in the Indian subcontinent. They are originated in Punjab, and they basically, I mean, just to say, they believe in. It was founded by Guru Nanak Dev Ji in response to a spiritual revelation, and he has 9 successors that the Sikhs believe in. Very simply put, they wear a turban on the head. Actually, a lot of Sikhs in America after 9/11 were
yeah.
misunderstood to be Muslims and had to bear the brunt of
Mhm.
Islamophobic attacks themselves. So they wear a turban, and I mean, that is
And there
one
there
such
was a
like
terrorist
one
attack
mark.
committed against a Sikh temple by an American who thought that he was walking into a
Yes,
mosque. He
yes,
was that fucking stupid. He walked into a mosque, shot up Sikhs, thinking that they
yes,
were Muslims because they thought that Muslims wore turbans because they watched Aladdin too many times. I don't know, but it was a lot of ignorance. I
yes.
remember walking into a convenience store, and there's a Sikh owner, and I've always been fascinated by the Sikhs. I'm saying, "Hey, you're Sikh," and I just want to have a conversation. He goes, "You know that I'm Sikh? How do you know that? You're American. You guys don't know what Sikhs are." I'm like, "Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
Yeah,
Okay."
it's like I'm sorry, we're all not complete dumbasses. Yeah,
I'm like, "That's fair. Okay,
yeah,
you
yeah.
okay,
deserve
yeah.
that one."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's actually also a community. It's a ethno-religious minority in India, and it's also a community that has faced a lot of
Yes.
persecution during the partition, but also in after the killing of Indira Gandhi, then the prime minister of one of the former prime ministers of India. There was an act of genocide, a pogrom committed against the Sikhs, a terrible one. So they have suffered a lot historically and continue to do
Yeah.
so.
No.
Yeah.
So that's it in a nutshell. You guys can research that on on your own time. But in the
Please
meantime,
do.
we're gonna move forward with this like solidarity between Sikhs, Muslims, and farmers in the face of this ethno
Yeah.
discrimination in India. So
Yeah. So there is, I mean, there is a lot of solidarity, but I think there is need for more solidarity. Like,
Mhm.
I think we need to have there is a lack of because of the oppression, because of because of this, the repression of the state is so much that to have solidarity is itself has become so difficult. So there are these people who have been for the longest time been the most loudest, have been relentlessly working on solidarities and continuously speaking against the government, and they've been at the receiving end as well. Like, I think I have done the bare minimum, and I've still been beaten up by the police multiple times. I've still, been. It has still been like suffered surveillance and all of that. Whereas there are people like Umar Khalid, Khalid Saifi, Gulfisha Fatima. These people who are behind bars, very young Muslims who are behind bars, and many more that I'm yet to name. Then there are people who are. Really going out of their way to do fact finding reports, etc., after multiple incidents of violence and attacks on Muslims, and who are trying to establish more solidarity, but there's still a lot of lack of it. And but I must say that the Sikhs have shown Muslims impeccable, like a
That's
lot of
beautiful.
solidarity, like even have gone out of their way, even in Myanmar, gone into the crisis and helped and supported the
Yeah.
Rohingyas. And so they've they've shown solidarity across, and they themselves are a minority, and so I think that's what the way
Thank you
forward
for
is,
saying
this
that.
kind
Thank
of
you for saying that
solidarity.
and mentioning that.
Yeah. So you were talking about
Yeah.
the persecution of activists and people in protests and stuff. You said you had some texts you wanted to read.
Oh yeah. Where did my I had some messages that my former
Oh, yeah,
classmate sent to
this is
me,
the
which
one
is
you were
full
in the
of
master's
abuses.
program with. That your
Yeah,
erstwhile friend.
it's um da, da, da. So basically, yeah, I mean he finds a new I mean I get a lot of, by the way, these threats etc on a regular basis, but this one is very unique because it is coming from former classmate, and I just want to show, like I just want to show, like if I can hide the number later on, just want to show that it's relentless. Like every month he sends a text to me, like it's just crazy. But he would say things like, go away from our land and take all your crime away too. You pay people don't deserve democracy. You have diluted our democratic because of people like you. Like in Hindi he's written, how can you be a minority? You are 18% of the population. You are rapists. You have been doing love jihad non-stop. um, and then like a lot of abuses. Go back, you cunts. What do you have a problem with what Indian government spending money on statues? You focus on your own country, you ask why don't you make a video about how you are a rapist, your community is a rapist. Why don't you make a video about the prophet, and then multiple abuses about like to Prophet Muhammad, and then um oh god, like I can just go on and on. If like there's so many abuses that are written in this, I don't know if I must say them out loud. Kya re jihadi
Oh,
kaisi
okay.
hai? That's what they call, like, oh dear, like, oh
Hmm.
jihadi, how are you?
Bharat Mata Ki Jai. Can we
Oh
talk
my
about
god,
that?
yeah, yeah. It's Yeah, we of course we can. So it basically says Bharat Mata ki jai. It's like the
Mhm.
goddess of India, like the goddess of India. Long live the goddess of India, like Mother India.
Yeah.
Long live Mother India. This idea of India being a mother actually came um, from
Mhm.
mother goddesses in general, like this idea of mother goddesses, which is a spiritual cultural belief, religious belief in India, but it gained a lot of popularity as an imagery in the Indian freedom struggle against the British. This idea that India
Mhm.
is a mother and all the people sacrificing their life to save India from the
Mhm.
hands of the British are the
So
sons
it's
of
turned
this
into
mother.
a
And so
mythological, nationalistic chant that's
yes,
now being used for Islamophobia.
yeah,
It's very similar to when the Nazis would use the mother, the land, the Deutschland, and mythologize the
yeah,
Aryan
yeah,
race and the Rhineland, and bring up all these, whether it be Viking style mythologies or
Or
something along the lines of adapting them.
like
yeah,
Aryan centric stuff.
Aryan
From
centrics,
anywhere from
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
anywhere from
India also has an
Odinism
Aryan
to
centric
Wagner.
theory,
yeah.
by the way.
Odin. It's like the Odin. It's the Odin
Yeah,
chant of that.
yeah,
Which
yeah.
all the
Oh,
history.
yeah.
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 Odinism to Wagner.
So basically, you would see a lot of Raja Ravi Verma was the artist who made these images of what a Mother India looks like. Always fair, Mother India, always fair, slick, like pretty conventional beauty standards, but always very traditional, and and all of those imagery. But also, so there's an image of this mother in the form in the shape of the Indian map, cartographic line, and you have all these freedom fighters standing around that image with their
Mm.
heads cut off as an offering to the mother, and all of those things sacrificing. And that was when they were fighting against the British, we were fighting against the British. And now increasingly this chant has become this and a couple of more, like for example the religious chant Jai Shri Ram, which is a very simple chant basically saying that long live the idea of Lord Ram. Like it's a very that may victory fall on Lord Ram always. And it's a particular kind of chant which was religious, but now all of these chants are being forced upon Muslims, like they're being forced to say it. If they don't say it, then they are if they don't say it, then they are villains and they are
Right.
anti-nationals. So yesterday, Muslim guy's auto in auto driver, a Muslim auto driver's auto was broken, and he was forced to chant GSR, which is Jai Shri Ram, and Bharat Mata Ki Jai. And when everything was broken when he refused, and continuously, like especially on 22nd of January, when the Ram Mandir was being inaugurated, there were celebrations across the country, and in amidst those celebrations, people were forcing Muslims to say it, as if these chants, these slogans will become valid, or these war cries will become valid only if they come out of Muslim mouths. It's also a method to show a particular kind
Mhm.
of supremacy over Muslims, to say that you will say things that
Right.
I want you to say,
And I noticed can you
whatever
talk about the
happens. Yeah.
competitiveness that they do with like for example that chant with the mother goddess of India versus the god of Abraham, Allah, like they do this competition thing. Like, you know what I mean? They villainize.
Oh, they say a lot of things about, yeah, there's this competition. I mean, there's a lot of, they believe that Muslims don't want to say it because it's our
Mm,
religious belief to not consider anyone else the God except Allah. And so that is another
yeah.
complication, the belief complication. And also, there's this book that from which this chant Vande Mataram, or like this idea of motherhood and like long live the mother, all of that comes from Bankim Chandra Chatterjee's book, Anand Mat, which is a very interesting text to be read, I must say. So yeah, it's all there, and everyone wants Muslims to chant these slogans. All, if you don't say it, they want to write it on your head. They will lynch you for not saying it, by the way. They will beat, like there were videos coming of Muslim workers, because they're at the worst receiving ends, are Muslim vendors, Muslim workers, and then they would put mics in front of them and they force them that you must say, you have to say, and then
Yeah, and
start
also,
beating them
I
up
mean,
if they don't do
that's
it.
just an old. I mean, people have been doing that for like millennia, forcing the enemy to chant their own victory songs and their own praises. So, like, we see that actually happening right now in the Gaza Strip. Like detainees are being
Yeah,
like stripped and being forced under threat of violence to say like, "Oh, we're the slaves." We're the willing
Yeah.
slaves of a certain family of Israelis, and so that, and then also you see like gurus calling like for rape, and this
Yeah.
fascination with rape, and it's not, rape in this context is never about sexual gratification.
actually, Savarkar and Hindutva ideologues talk a lot about rape as a tool
Yeah,
of
it's a tool of
elimination.
elimination because that's called war rape, which is a form of ethnic cleansing, right? You literally
Yeah.
breed them out of the species, and also it's certain.
And nothing, we saw that in Bosnia,
Yeah.
Yeah, in
Herzegovina, and
Rwanda as
such big
well,
things. Yeah.
and also
And Rwanda
um,
as well.
it just the act itself about like violation and transgression. It's not about sexual gratification. It's about reinforcing a power structure of dominance. Yeah,
Yeah. It's power. It's power. Rape is about power, always, has
Yeah.
always
right.
been about power.
I
So
want to do a whole
I
segment
mean,
on episode on that, by the way, one of these days, about
yeah,
the use of rape in imperialism.
yeah,
They are very
imperialism, but
parallel.
also, yeah,
Yeah.
also it's just wild watching this act of genocide play out in the Eastern Mediterranean and seeing the same exact rhetoric and like social mechanisms play out in India at the same time. Even though it's been happening for a while, it's just the stark the stark comparison now that it's happening contemporaneously
Yeah.
is well disturbing and deeply troubling, and
Yeah.
the fact that it's just yeah,
Similarities
I
are
mean, well, because
crazy.
genocide incitement speech isn't like unique. There's no like different way to do it. There's one way. It's through dehumanization, division, creating
This is
a minority that is a villain that must be cleansed. So
And
it's
mythology.
yeah,
Mythology
yeah,
too
yeah,
is a factor.
yeah, yeah,
yeah. And like distorting
yeah.
historical
Revisionist
facts,
Yes.
basically.
history.
Well, you
So
brought up an interesting point.
so
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask her. You brought up an interesting point about how they're kind of rewriting history, Indian history, to make it seem like there was this golden age, this continuous golden age, and it was interrupted by the outsiders, by Muslims. That before the Muslims came, it was just this: everybody held hands, they lived in the golden age. It was, you had a king, everybody was happy, and then the outsiders came in, and then they ruined everything. So that's
They destroyed our lands, they destroyed our which is true. Like, people have been invaders and trying to take over kingdoms historically everywhere,
yeah,
and have committed, like, royalties have always committed violence, and kings and queens have like led wars and destroyed
yeah.
peoples and
I
cultures
was
and
reading about the
killed
history really
them.
quick and briefing it. And it was so confusing, all the different things that were happening. But they're, if you're saying that they're painting it like it's black and white, like big block, next block, it doesn't work that way. And but we see this in the United States too. Obviously, like when Trump was president, it was like we need to go back to the old days, in
Yeah,
the
make
old
America
golden
great
era,
again. Yeah,
make America great again.
That's for India as well. Make India great again. We need to go back to
yeah,
Yeah,
antiquity. We need to go back to the
yeah,
methods and culture, and this call to go back to a particular
yeah,
kind of governance, a particular kind of society. This whole Sanatan, the idea of a Sanatan dharma, is deeply rooted in calling back, and this idea of ghar vapsi, which is that all those who've been converted out of Hinduism need to bring back into the
yep,
folds of Hinduism. And that's called Ghar Vapsi, which is
yeah.
returning home.
right.
So convert as many as you want to into this and bring them into the fold. And interestingly, Muslim women have been at the as a terrible receiving end. Earlier, Muslim women were seen as victims, people that need to be saved from the villain that the
Mm,
Muslim man is. And then later on, now that Muslim women started being very vocal and speaking against fascism and sitting in protest and doing all of those things, now Muslim women have become villains. They hate Muslim women, especially Muslim women who are speaking up and challenging them. They hate them and they call for their rapes. They, as I mentioned earlier, auction them online all the time, create these apps.
Yeah, can you?
The images that Muslim women put
We
online on
talked
Eid.
about this during the live yesterday about this practice of auctioning. We haven't touched on that yet. Can you go back and kind of explain what
yeah,
that
yeah. I want to
is?
hear about it.
Yeah, I will. I will. So basically, since the Citizenship Amendment Act, a lot of Muslim women were, I mean, before that as well, we've had some incredible Muslim women fighting against the Hindutva Fascism for a very, very long time. And now what had happened was, since 2000, in 2019, 20, all of that, Muslim women started sitting in protest, sat in protest over the night, basically singing and talking and articulating the politics, talking to international media across the country, sitting in multiple places, cities, protesting, speaking up, questioning the Hindutva state. They became villains. Now, Muslim women in India right now are activists, are writers, are poets, are journalists, are scientists, are influencers. They're all of those things. And so they started writing, they started speaking up, they started doing poetry. I mean, I myself was performing poems on the streets to question the lynchings that were happening on the streets of Muslims, and all of those things. And there were journalists, Muslim journalists and student activists who continuously speaking up and coming together. And so what they started doing was they created an app first, and there were multiple Reddit subgroups that are talking about things that they want to do when raping these Muslim women, so you could just find them out there. But there are also these two big apps that were created. One was called, so Muslim women as a slur are addressed as mulli, and like the worst of those words is bully and sulli. And so they created two GitHub apps. One was called Bully Bai, where photos and images of these Muslim women who were vocal were put up, and people could put in money and basically, like they were being auctioned, like you could buy them, metaphorically buy
So
them.
bizarre. So bizarre.
Yeah, so bizarre. And also coming from like India as a society, there's a lot of like like for me, when we were growing up, this idea that our photos could get leaked or like be morphed on pornographic websites was is a big thing, because the idea of quote unquote honor and the misogyny of it is deeply rooted in our spaces. So for us, life for women ends if things like these happen to us. Like the way society treats you when these things happen. So we were all coming from those backgrounds. Of course, now like really empowered, articulate women and all of these things bother us. But the fact that, I mean, but it does bother us to see your faces morphed on pornographic material and all of those things, and your images without consent, etc., being used in different ways. And so Bullibai and Sulli Deals were these two apps that were created by young engineers studying in the fanciest
Coming back to
engineering
that, but they had,
institutes.
yeah.
They were arrested.
Oh no, it was just
They were arrested, but let go. But let go that they have a bright future. One of them was arrested only. So anyway, so these, and I was also auctioned on these apps and like other
How
very
much did you
brilliant
go
Muslims
for?
like
What was the final
uh,
auction price?
I don't even remember. Like it
a couple
was,
crore, like
I didn't go for cheap for sure, but yeah, so that is why I mean, yeah, every time every time I post anything random online, like even an opinion, the kind of hate that I get in comments and all of those things is massive. And so there we have Muslim journalists like Fatima, like Ali Shan, like the whole Maktub media, who are just really out there doing God's work. I feel writers who are trying to question the state. But yeah, they're being auctioned online and like trolled online all the time. Death threats, rape threats, picked up, put behind bars, cases on them. It's an everyday nest now. I must say, over the past 10 years, I've not felt safe in my country
Mhm.
even once. I have people, young children. I come from a very working class neighborhood. It's only our generation that had started now doing and studying and doing things, and we've started. I come from such narrow lanes, as I say, that the sky itself is not so visible. And now that our children have started seeing dreams of doing bigger things in life, I it breaks my heart to say that I don't think that they have that kind of future in this country at all. Like a whole community has stopped gossiping. When we and our cousins meet, we only talk about this. We talk about how our cousins' children are facing harassment by little kids,
Mm.
their own classmates, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, discrimination in classroom by their classmates because they are Muslims. They're being called terrorists. Their people are not sharing tiffins with them. Um, there are people whose roommates in colleges are refusing to stay with them because they are Muslims. Um, and offices have become so right wing. I remember when this government came into power in 2019, I was working out of a very right wing office at that time, Hindutva office at that time, briefly. Hated it. I had to take an off on the day the results were declared, because they decorated the entire office. They played it on the screens, the result, and were trying to mock Muslims. I was the only Muslim actually in the whole building, and I had to take an off. I'm so scared because our neighbors who are so nice to us, they might just come and burn a house down, because I saw what happened in 2020, the pogrom that happened in Northeast Delhi with my own eyes. I saw it. I saw mosque being burned down. I saw and heard stories of people whose neighbors had burnt their house or raped their children. And so there were three. If there were three shops, the one in the middle was a Muslim shop, and the one on the right and the left were Hindu shops, Hindu owned shops. The center one was burnt down. And I've seen it with my own eyes. I was not born when the Babri Masjid was brought down and the violence that ensued after happened. So I was born after that. And so I grew up, I was born immediately after that. So I grew up in that atmosphere. And then I've only seen hatred. I've only seen hatred in the past 10 years. And yeah, like everyday lives, like for example, vendors who are Muslims and have India online payments is very popular for vendors right now. Fatima in Quint did a article on how these QR codes are leaving Muslim vendors so vulnerable. Payments through
How
QR
so?
codes, because of after demonetization that happened in India, when you go and you buy something, for example, a woman recently bought a juice from a vendor, and then when she scanned the QR code, the name that came up was that of a Muslim. And so she blamed that Muslim vendor for, hiding his identity. And he's like, I'm not hiding my
Mm.
identity. But the more these Muslim names come in front of people, want to attack them. And that video went viral of her abusing that poor Muslim guy. And it's become, every time I walk around and you see the faces, like the images of helpless videos of helpless Muslims being hounded by these super loud women, pulling their hair, hitting them, kicking them, calling vendors, like beating the shit out of these vendors, like so much. Workers are being the badly Muslim workers are badly being treated. Like, I am an English speaking woman in India who now like makes my own money, whatever, but whatever background that I come from, at least I have gained some kind of social capital and privilege. But if we could be at the worst receiving ends, just imagine the kind of things that daily wage workers in India are going through who are Muslims. Just having an identity of wearing a skull cap or having a beard or wearing a hijab, which was actually being banned in India multiple times, you see it, and worst, because you see your friends turning right wing, their families turning right wing, Hindutva supporting Islamophobic folks. You see the people that are being elected basically being goons and rabid hate mongers. And so, yeah, it's just the everyday life in India is terrible. And right now, whatever is like the whole genocide that the Israel is undertaking in Gaza and on Palestinian people is continuously used as a tool to further that hate in India right now,
So
basically
do you
claiming that this will
see
happen.
any like hope of this getting better in the future, or do you think it's just downhill
Not in the
until it
near
gets so
future.
bad something else has to change?
Yeah, not in the near future. I think right now the BJP has a lot of power, lot of money, lot of international support, and lot of ratification by the people. So till now, there were a lot of theories and like reports of EVMs or electronic voting machines being hacked, etc. But I am a believer. I completely believe that people genuinely are so hateful and are genuinely voting for the BJP because of this idea of development, which we've seen that always
Yeah.
happens in fascist governments. Nazis and fascists are elected into power under this mirage of good governance,
Well,
development,
hey,
economic empowerment,
Modi
which is
did
all
hook
bullshit.
up a lot of gas lines and made a lot of public toilets, so he must be doing such a good
It's all about
Which
those
is a
job.
lie.
home
But yeah,
comforts.
Wait, it's a lie?
which
Oh,
is all a
because I
lie.
thought, like,
Yeah.
that's the story we got in the West, that he made all these massive infrastructure
I mean, yeah,
dams.
he's apparently doing all of those things. Yeah, he's doing all of those things. Like, for example, I'll tell you one more story that you'll hear in the West and which Modi
Okay.
keeps using continuously is installing of solar, like this solar energy, India being the leader in solar energy.
Okay.
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 Now, it is
Yeah.
on paper. We've met the numbers of being the leader in solar energy. But actually, the land on which all of these solar panels and equipment has been put is considered wasteland, but actually has removed a
Mm,
lot of people from the indigenous people have, and their livelihoods have been destroyed. They've been removed from those spaces. Like, it's
yeah.
all a farce. Like there are a lot of numbers that are being used. There's a lot of articulation. Earlier, the RSS did not have such articulate people, but right now they're training the people, sending them to fancy Ivy League institutions, getting them to represent India in places, being super. And you would be very, I mean, not surprised, but actually, there are a lot of queer activists who are fascist right
Right.
wingers
Yeah.
in India. So there's a whole group of trans folks, trans women
Pink
led by
washing.
this
Yeah.
More
woman.
pink washing.
Yeah, like Lakshmi, who is actually supremely like supporter of all of this and multiple. And then you have this another gay guy whose name is Abhijit, who is also a rabid hate monger. And so you will see all of these things continuously happening in India on a regular basis. So it's I don't see immediate hope. I don't think that tomorrow things are going to get better. I don't think things are going to get better in the next 5 years, because we are doomed. Really bright minds are behind bars. Press has no freedom. All the media is completely bought, sold. They were able to share on the 26th of January, which is India's Republic Day, when the Indian Constitution was brought into force. That day, this year, Indian government, I mean, they invited Macron as their
Oh yeah.
chief guest. The Indian government, who, by the way, went to a Sufi Muslim, like a Sufi shrine. And I'm like, weren't you Islamophobic
Mhm.
just like yesterday?
Yeah.
What is wrong with you? But the government of India shared the preamble of the Indian Constitution on the social media, and from that preamble was they removed two words. They shared the older version of the preamble, which basically included the word socialist and
Mhm.
secular later on. They shared the older version without the word socialist and secular, and not a single person across the country said churchu at all. Like, no one even questioned that a sitting government shared the older preamble, removing the word secular, removing the word socialist from it. So it also shows which direction they are headed in the future. Mosques are being destroyed. In the last week itself, mosque in Haldwani and a Islamic school has been destroyed in Haldwani. The Delhi municipality destroyed a Sufi shrine as well as a mosque and a graveyard, and an orphanage, by 900, like 500-600 year old structures, saying that they are encroachments.
Wow.
Imagine calling 600-year-old structures. And I lived in that area for the longest time, and I those places were very important to me. But anyway, they were completely destroyed, and not a single person says anything. And actually, Christians are also at a very terrible receiving end. This idea of Christians and Muslims converting people has become a big
Yeah, bro.
conspiracy in India.
Love
Big
jihad.
conspiracy.
Probably one of my new favorite terms. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh, not
Uh,
just love jihad.
Yeah.
Muslims donating organs. Oh, there was a COVID jihad also. Basically, Muslims were considered the reason why COVID came into
COVID
India.
jihad.
Oh my God. And then there was a flood jihad. There was a flood jihad where Muslims were helping people during floods. It was called flood jihad. Then Muslims were donating organs to other people. It was called organ jihad. It's irrelate, like it's nonstop.
So
It
any
is
yeah.
funny.
So
Like sometimes the way India is headed, I don't know whether to laugh or to
yeah.
cry.
It is
So
Jesus
hilarious.
Christ.
if you
Today,
don't like something, yeah,
yesterday,
Give it a name. Give it a name.
yeah,
Love jihad.
y- yeah,
yeah.
yesterday, there's a reserved forest where there are two lions living. The lioness is called Sita, and the lion is called Akbar. Okay.
Okay.
One is a visibly Hindu name, and one is like a Muslim name. Okay.
Uh,
A Hindutva organization did a case in the court saying that the lioness named Sita and the lion named Akbar should not be allowed to live together, because that's two different religious names. And I am not kidding.
yeah.
That's hilarious.
Well,
Is there?
you don't want the lion doing like animal kingdom jihad. So it's just really funny. It's like if you're in the Middle
Yeah,
East, everything you don't like is Hamas. If you're in
Or
India,
jihad?
it's just it's jihad, or it's jihad. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is there? Are there any voices
Totally,
to like focus on some positive aspects that may be going on or not going on? I don't know. Um, I've seen.
I mean, the positive aspects that I see is the rise of independent media in India, crowdfunding
Yeah.
media in India. There are journalists who are putting their lives at risk to speak about it. There are a lot of voices online that are speaking up. There are these traditional, like older people, like people who have been, uh, left leaning,
Yeah.
progressive people who've been fighting for social justice for a very long time. Names like Harsh Mandir, names like Professor Apurvanand Jha, names like some folks from the Communist Party as well, Nadeem Khan, like these names of people, Natasha Devangana, like all of these people who've been put behind bars, have suffered repression of the state, but they continue to speak up. There continues to be this group of people called Karwane Mohabbat, or the Caravan of Love, where people actually go out of their way post violence in violence hit areas and create ground finding reports. Like they're at least archiving all of these things. Then there are artists and musicians, there are poets and writers like Hussein, Nabia, Amir Aziz, Alishan Jafari, people who are actually archiving all of this that is happening. And these are some of the Muslim voices, but there are a lot of Dalit and Adivasi voices. Adivasi are indigenous people of India, and a lot of Dalit voices, artists, writers, independent media who are speaking up and writing in big ways, facing persecution,
Yeah.
facing repression, but continuing to do that.
What about Hindu voices?
But the
Is
voices
there are there a lot of Hindu voices that are voices of reason and peace that are
yeah, I mean there
and
always will
I'm
be.
sure
There
they're
are some
persecuted as
like
well by their
some
own self-hating Hindu. It's like a self this
yeah, they are in their own ways, yes.
yeah, and
Yes, you're right.
they probably get labeled
But
self-hating
most
Hindu.
of them
Like if you're Jewish and you protest against Israel, you're a self-hating Jew.
liberandus, liberals. They're called
Liberandus.
liberandus and
Okay.
liberals.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's new names. We are very like the Hindutva right wing is very, very
Right.
creative
Yeah.
in naming names, in like putting names to people. Yeah. And they have this thing, oh my god, every time a Muslim speaks, they're like, go to Pakistan. And I'm like, yes, people in Pakistan at the border are waiting for us. As a Shia Muslim, I'm like, okay, yes. First genocide here, then one Shia genocide in
Right.
Pakistan also. What what is this shit? But yeah, we're quite doomed. Like in the way India is headed, we are headed towards a very non-democratic declaration of a Hindutva Rashtra with terrible citizenship, law in power, which will which would put a lot of Muslims in detention camps and render them non-citizens of the country.
Has that
And so,
legislation passed though? Because I know that they were going
yes,
to
it has become the
reevaluate.
Citizenship Amendment Act. No, no, no. All that was just
Oh, that was talk.
mouth
Okay,
service. They're not
because
reevaluating.
how it
They've
stood like
promised to
during the
implement
Trump
it before the
administration,
elections
there was
happen
talk
in the
about
next few months.
sorry, my audio is cutting out. Yeah, they're going to reevaluate everyone's citizenship, and if you didn't have a birth certificate, you would lose your citizenship and maybe be deported somewhere. But like, if you were Hindu or you were Christian, you could get your citizenship back again. So that kind of like was deliberately
Yeah.
targeting Muslims.
Now, if you are Hindu, Sikh, Jain, like if you are a Hindu, then only, not
No, I thought it was
Christians.
Christians too. Okay, well,
They later on added Christians, but it was primarily Hindus and anyone, because in India, like Hindus are like like officially a lot of the ethno minority religions like Buddhism and Jainism and Sikhism. Sometimes people completely appropriate them and put them under
okay,
Hindu as
Yeah.
well.
all right. So
Yeah, it was passed by the parliament, and right now, Amit Shah has said that we will implement them before the government comes into like before the new government comes into power, and the new government will be them. Basically, it was the law. It was passed in 2019, and people across the country were sitting in protest. It basically said that religious minorities were being persecuted from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Christians were added later on. But first, it was Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, Parsis, and if they arrived in India before 2014, they would be considered citizens of India. But this eligibility will not be given to Muslims at all. So it was primarily an act, a law aimed against Rohingyas, Bangladeshi Muslims, which they believe are coming from the borders and taking over and culturally destroying the country, and they are the terrorists, and they are bringing their
yeah,
kids and whatnot. So that was there. So later on, they added Christians, and they said, yeah, Christians could be, but
right.
not Muslims at all. So yeah, so it's like where and a lot of people in India till today believe that if the partition of India happened on the basis of religion, then all Hindus should have stayed there, and all Indians and all Muslims deserve to be in Pakistan, when without realizing that Pakistan might have been formed on theocratic grounds, but India was formed on secular grounds. It was to be a secular republic, and also like the independence struggle was, I mean, continuously Muslims in India have to prove that they are loyal to India. They have to prove that, oh, we love our country, we love our country, we love our country. You have to continuously say that you love your country
Mhm.
when the country doesn't actually love you back. And there's a poem that I wrote about this, but yeah, it's true that you keep they keep expecting us to love the country despite what they're doing to us, um, all the time, and prove it compulsory. Like you will see it for sure, like how every Muslim is forced to have the flags on there. Not forced, like they must put it, because if they don't put a flag, a Indian flag on their shops, etc., then they will not be considered patriotic enough. Whereas everyone else is allowed to just assumed to be patriotic.
Right, because that's not a fascist dynamic at all.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Give
Sorry,
it.
we're still figuring out the flow.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I like it. Given the fact though that India has the second largest Muslim population, which members of on the international, on the international map have risen to be the strongest allies of the Muslim community in India? Like, and as which ones have really stood above the rest as being voices for advocacy for the Muslim population in India that you've noticed, or that you guys feel like in your culture as the biggest allies?
Mm, we've had some international organizations across the world who have shown solidarities. Organizations like the usual organizations that have come up and supported, and like human rights, who talk about human rights violations. So you will see the Human Rights Watch, or like I mean, their solidarity and how I perceive them is different, but they have shown solidarity, and they've worked on the Indian, like the persecution of Indian Muslims, whether it is, and people have been really vocal. People like Kenneth Roth of Human Rights Watch, people like, you know, Hindus against Hindutva, Hindus for
Hindus for
Justice,
Justice.
organizations like these. Something Hindus for Justice, no, sorry, something Hindus for
Okay.
something. Hindus for Peace or
What
Hindus
about
for Justice,
nations?
something like that. There's an
What
organization.
about countries? Which countries?
Actually, except the Palestinian nations, we've not had, but there was one, not, no country has per se come forward and said we are there for Indian
Really?
Muslims
What about
ever.
Indonesia? Indonesia?
Yeah,
Not
no, no
really.
one.
Why? Why is
Um,
that? That's the part
yeah,
that confuses me.
no one has publicly, even Bangladesh, who has such a strong stand against, has such a strong stand against Israel, that for the longest time the Bangladeshi, I mean, you know the story of Bangladesh. When the Bangladesh was created, and the partition of Pakistan happened and Bangladesh was created with the support of India, Israel was one of the first countries to offer their recognition of Bangladesh, and Bangladesh returned Israel's recognition, saying that we don't recognize you. That's what Bangladesh did. For the longest time, Bangladesh's passport had that they don't recognize the state of Israel. And so, even that country and the prime minister of that country sends gifts to Modi and calls him her
What's
older
the
brother.
why?
So,
How
no one has shown, actually, the people of Palestine have shown the most solidarity to Indian Muslims across this times. There was one incident where there was a lot of things said against the prophet, against the prophet Muhammad, and so then that was the time when the UAE had, issued a statement. Saudi Arabia and UAE have issued the statement, but they had remained quiet when the atrocities on Muslims were happening, but they spoke up when someone made fun of the prophet and said a lot of things against him, and all of those things happened. But why would they? Because UAE, KSA, all of these people are already fascists in their own ways, and they love Modi, they honor him with titles and all of those things.
that's
So
that's that's to me
that's
is
another
just
story.
so shocking is that like the predominantly Muslim nations out there, they're not showing any support for Muslims in India. Like what about Indonesia? What's the relationship there? Is there any type of
Just average touristy relationship. Everyone in India goes to Indonesia for their honeymoons.
so Indonesia
Like,
hasn't been vocal for the Muslims in India? What do
I
you
mean,
know why is
they have spoken out in the ICJ against Israel, but I haven't heard anything about them speaking about the persecution in India.
I wish
there's a
somebody would explain why.
there is a lot of India and Indonesia have like great strategic ties. Like culturally, historically, there's a lot of partnership, a lot of agreement, especially around naval agreements, like a lot of
So it's
maritime
economic. It's
agreements,
economic
uh,
reasons.
trade and
Okay.
connectivity. Yeah. So
All
there's a
about the
lot of
money, baby.
economic relations
All
that
about
we, yeah, a lot of economic relations that India has with Indonesia, especially through like free trade agreements under ASEAN and all of that. But Indonesia has never spoken up. Like officially, no one's spoken up at all.
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of dharmic, like there's a lot of historical, cultural, spiritual similarities between.
Yeah, I suppose it must feel very isolating right now,
Yeah. Yeah.
just being stuck with this alt right freaking government
Hopeless, actually, very hopeless.
oppressed. Yeah,
Yeah.
You
oppressed.
know, when I speak to my Palestinian Muslim friends, we often vent with each other. Just share venting. You know, we vent and cuss and all that stuff about the lack, and it's kind of a bizarre predicament or a bizarre stance for me to take, and it's very iffy because I'm not Muslim, I'm Christian, but I like to put myself in my Muslim shoes often when I talk to my Muslim friends, and I'm like, where is the solidarity with amongst Muslims, amongst Muslim nations? And my Palestinian friends say that's how we feel. And but I have to be careful about saying that, you know, too publicly, because it's like, well, you're not even Muslim. Why do you say that? But it's like, well, I'm involved. I'm like, I'm in that world too, and in some weird way through my friends and my obsession with Islam and everything. So, anyways, it's something that we talk about. And I think it's a problem that a lot of Muslims have expressed to me is the lack of solidarity in the Islamic world, internationally, anyways. You know, and I hope I'm not out of place by saying that, not being a Muslim. You know.
I mean, I first want to talk about the first circle of solidarity. We don't have solidarity from our classmates
Mhm.
and friends. So, like everyone else is so
Yeah,
far. We don't
no,
have solidarity from our. So that itself has become such a big thing. And in fact, my work right now, all my research work is totally core around allyship and solidarity. And I'm actually writing a toolkit. I was in residency to finish this book. It's called, it's actually a response to the book Hindutva by Veer Savarkar, but he's called Veer, it's just VD Savarkar. That book, Hindutva, I'm writing like a response to that. Along with it, I'm writing this book called every time I spoke to people and said, where is your solidarity, they would say, but
yeah,
what can we do? When I was going to protest, I remember my childhood friend, closest friend, she and her husband, and we were talking, and I was like, oh, I'm going, and she and her husband was coming to be at the protest site, and my friend basically said that, are you sure it's not a safe place to go? And to him, not to me, of course, because I mean, we have no choice but to sit and protest. I, as a poet, would want to write about beauty and love and this and that, but you realize that petitions require more blood than love letters, and so you continuously just focus on writing about this, and so you realize that they care about their safety and security more than they do about solidarity. And every time you question them, they would say things like, oh, what can we do? And so that is why I decided to write a book called The Toolkit of Solidarity: How to Stand Up for Indian Muslims.
mhm,
Um, and that's it's a very, it's like an illustrated book, like how to stand up in solidarity if you're an employer, if you're an employee, if you're a neighbor, if you're a friend, if you're a spouse, if you are this, if you're that, and all of those things. And so this idea that we, at least we will tell you how to stand in solidarity, just all of those things. And so I think that, yeah, there's an absolute lack of solidarity from our immediate circles itself, so just going so far ahead, and also very little expectations from people who are bombing and destroying Yemen, or people who do not give, where there is barely, who themselves don't care. They're all hand in glove, basically. They're all, they have similar tendencies. I mean, you look at CC, or you look at what is happening in, I mean, as a Muslim, okay, so there's also a sectarian thing, not a sectarian thing per se, but Saudi, for example, has, I don't know if it's relevant at all, but just putting it out there, has destroyed some of the graves of people that we as Shia
yeah,
Muslim revered. So for us, it's like a big thing. So we never even looked at Saudi for solidarity, because the way they treat the Shia population is
yeah.
ridiculous. um Now looking at, like, for example, I mean, all of these, I mean, this is basically the thing that, we've not gotten solidarity for such a long time, you don't even expect them to show it. But it's important for all of these things to come to the forefront, so that, and come to international spaces, so that people know at least that what is happening in India. We're already at, like, one of the last stages of genocides. Detention camps in India have
I
been
saw
built
that on John
already.
Oliver's
People being
episode. He
lynched.
talked about the
Yeah,
detention camps. What are those built already? Are they going to be used soon? Are they being used?
yeah, already built.
Yeah, yeah,
Already
yeah.
built, and in fact, a lot of the laborers who were building these camps would probably end up being there. Basically, all those who would not qualify in the Citizenship Amendment Act will be
This is
thrown into
insane.
detention
We're
camps. And we made
witnessing
a lot of jokes about
the
it.
beginning stages of, like, the concentration camps, like, in real time. Like, we didn't we
I mean,
or the world was blind.
we're far beyond the initial stages, honestly, if we're looking at it,
Yeah,
because we've had this speech building for decades now,
Well, the
and now
speech,
they're
yes,
starting to
but the
put into
building of
practice with
concentration
legislation
camps.
and building. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's why I'm
Guy,
saying we're beyond the
yeah.
initial stage. It's
We
beyond the
so
initial
guys, you
see.
hear
stages.
that? They're building concentration camps right now. They're right now. It's happening, like, in India, and they're
Detention.
almost, and,
Yeah,
well, detention camps, concentration camps, administration camps,
yeah.
happy-go-lucky camps, whatever.
Same thing.
Like, and I
Same
see the
thing.
similarities also with this and the building of detention camps, re-education camps in Western China for the Uyghur population.
Yeah,
It's
the
insane.
population
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
See, Muslims already in India live in ghettos. By the way, all of us live in ghettos
Mhm.
already, and so because they felt, I could not get a house as Muslims. It's impossible. It's so difficult to find a house on rent across the country. I could not get a house in Pune for six
Mhm.
months. 6 months I could not get a house because I'm a Muslim. And it's very, very common. So we already live
Like
in ghettos.
not even
We
a
already, since childhood, have been facing this kind of discrimination.
Your audio cut out, Greg.
no. Yeah, I'm having massive technical difficulties. Sorry, guys.
So it's all good.
So it's so difficult. Like, you just Google and you would know. Not a single Muslim that I know who has stepped out of their ghetto and has tried to find a house in another city has found it easily. It's been the most difficult, most tiring, most insulting, most discriminating procedure. Like, after a point, I started calling people and asking them, "I'm a Muslim. Would you
Yeah,
give me your house?" It was that bad.
that's
So
insane.
yeah, we already live in ghettos. We already face discrimination. We've been facing it for a very, very long time. Now we keep cracking jokes about, what will happen to us in detention camps. In fact, a movie was made earlier on this, called Leila. It's based on a book by Prayag Akbar. It's a book that he wrote, and it is now turned into a Netflix movie that shows some insights into the camp. And now, at this point, by the way, must talk about the propaganda movies that are being made in Bollywood. Every single movie that comes out of Bollywood right now, big blockbuster, is
Yeah.
propaganda. This called Kashmir Files, that villainizes the people of Kashmir. Then it is the Kerala Files, again, all lies, all lies, all lies. Um, and so it's just become like a thing how movies, etc., are being used. And if you make anything against the government, it will not get passed. You will not get permission from the censor board to release it, also.
Right.
Well, you look
So
tired.
yeah, it seems like everything's moving towards this trend. The government's consolidating power. The media is now locked into a system of not celebrating hate speech. They call it clickbait speech or whatever. Just to get more views that the government reinforces
They glorify it. They
that
said,
the
look how
media
strong this
capitalizes
leader is.
on. That
They basically say, look how strong this leader is. He made such a nice statement.
Yeah.
They praise it.
right.
They don't even
So
question it. Like, it's not like they're questioning. The
yeah,
media
yeah.
spokesperson themselves say
I mean,
things. Like, they themselves pick up the mic and say things against Muslims.
Yeah.
on a regular basis. Our friends are behind bars because the media did media trials on them, and because of that they are behind bars. Fake They popularized fake shit on air every single day to villainize Muslims. If When things become better, if I would write petitions after petitions to punish people, it will be the media folks. It will be people like Sudhir Chaudhary. It will be people, channels like Z News. It will be Arnab Goswami. All of these journalists who have only spewed hatred, Rubika Liaquat and all these people who have, Anjana Om Kashyap, who have, I mean, there's so many who have only spewed hatred day in and day out against Muslims
Well,
and filled their
I mean,
pockets. And in fact, one of them,
yeah.
they all went to Israel. Oh my God, I must tell you, all of these media folks post 7th October actually went to Israel to show the kind of great things that the Israeli occupation forces are doing, and to celebrate Israel and say what they are doing is, full on attack on quote unquote terrorists. And they posted video after video after video about it, and they ran it on their channels. They, like a whole delegation of
Yeah.
journalists went, and they created, so they use a lot of VFX, etc. It's a whole drama that they do on air, and they create those VFX of war, and they're hiding like this, and they're chilling with IOF soldiers and all of that. It was all over. So they are vile
Yeah.
Yeah.
internationally. Like everywhere they go, they
Yeah.
do this. So it's
So it's
yeah,
like
so they actually did.
all ethno-fascist roads lead to the that place in the Eastern Mediterranean that we shall not name.
Th-
Yeah, yeah.
that phrase, "the
It is,
world
it
is a
is.
stage," has become more and real.
Yeah. It is, it is. It's
World is a
they
fucking stage.
they're all brothers. Like they love learning from each other. They give tutorials to each other on a regular basis. I mean, Indian government is the father of fascism in in South Asia. It is actually the big brother that is teaching the Sri Lankan government how to oppress their people and create Islamophobia, like also feed into
Yeah,
Islamophobia in Sri
and
Lanka.
they've already
So
had their own
it's
genocidal history as well. But yeah, global fascism, it's on the rise, not just in South Asia. It's Europe, South Central America, everywhere. So I definitely think we should focus. People in the West should focus more on India for a plethora of reasons. But
Yeah.
yeah, it looks like I'm sorry. It seems like things are going to get, as you said, worse before they get better in the foreseeable future. Until this form of government becomes untenable politically, socially, and economically. So I think we're at the 2 hour mark. Is there anything else? Any closing comments you would like to make?
Yeah, I think it is important for all of us. The only way we are going to move forward in our fight against this rise of global fascism is cross movement solidarities. I think it is very
Yeah.
important for us across movements, resistance, cultural tactics, that we are able to learn from each other, listen to each other, and also create joint actions to fight them. I might not be able to say a lot of things while living in India, but I'm sure there will be someone who can extend absolute solidarity towards
Yeah.
us as Muslims and be able to bring up these issues in wherever they are. Or there could be tactics that different resistance movements are using that we could use, and could do it together. What are the joint actions that we could do? How do we subvert international spaces that have been co opted by fascists? All of these places like COP or UNCSW, and all of these places are completely taken over by these very articulate, corporate, quote unquote, empowered, almost right wing folks who are destroying. The fiber of conversations around social justice. So, how do we? I mean, it's very important for us to be able to, take away those spaces and support alternative media, independent media, that is not sold out to the state and to the corporates. And yeah, it's very important. I mean, this conversation that I'm having with all of you is so
Yeah.
important because I might not be the leader or the expert, but at least if through whatever I'm saying, some people are able to know more about the kind of genocide that is happening in India, it would serve a huge purpose towards creating
Yeah.
solidarities. And I think that becomes really, really
I
essential.
think that actually needs to become more part of the conversation because we really haven't talked about that much. We like putting it into those terms, at least not in the little corner of social media that I inhabit within the pro-Palestinian sphere. So cross-movement solidarity, I think that's going to be part of the episode title, even if we really only touched on it at the very end. And that's something we should definitely explore more in the future. So
Well, it paints a bigger picture of it.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
just
that's my day
It
job.
well, the reason why
I
the
think
subject
it's
is
pretty
so
late.
important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just one more thing. The reason why this is so important that we are talking about this is because this is all part of a greater picture that we're seeing. The rise of fascism, the rise of nationalism, the rise of fake pageantry. It's happening in pockets around the world, but they all have so much in common, and they are all connected in a ways, even if we don't see it. So, and we have to understand that even if you're not Muslim and you're watching this, don't think it can't happen to your group. Whatever group you're a part of, it will happen to you eventually. It's just a matter of time. So when we put focus on this now, we're protecting other groups as well as but of course, you know, I'll leave it at that. I can go on forever about it, but yeah, it's I
Yeah, yeah. There's a little verse that is written by one poet called Rahat Indori. I mean, I will just read out the translation of sorts. I'll just say the translation. It basically says that when the village will be put on fire, my house will not be the only one that will be burnt down.
exactly.
Your house
Wow.
also be caught. It won't be late when your house will be burnt down.
Absolutely. I think we definitely need to spread that around. Well, yeah. Thank you so much for
Not the fire, but the love.
oh yeah. I would just reverse it, right? So anyways, thank you
Sabika,
so much
thank you.
for
I
coming
learned so
on.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We really appreciate your
Thank you.
time
Thank you
and
so much.
we know it's really late for you there, so we'll go ahead and let you go. If you could stay on after
Yes.
we start ending the recording, there's a couple other things we'd like to
Bye.
get to. But yeah, thanks y'all for listening, and we will be back in a couple of days.
Yes, sir.
Very much.
Thanks, Greg, for
Yep.
inviting her. Ending
Yeah.
recording
Thank
now.
you.